Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today, we're going to go through the 2018 governor elections because it is September 1st, 2018, and like the beginning of every month, I go through all of the races. So on your screen right now are the contested races for the 2018 governor elections. Actually, we have one more to add to that column, and that is the state of Tennessee and Kansas. But right now, actually, I can characterize Texas, but we will come back to it and revisit that state. Right now, the Democrats have 10 seats, and the Republicans have 14, with 26 pretty much contested races for this point in time. Right now, we can go through some likely states for both the GOP and the Democrats, but there are some safe states that we can characterize as safe at this point in time. Just it may seem a little bit weird starting them off as safe states. So, for example, the state of Massachusetts right now is going to be rated as safe for Governor Charlie Baker, with being the most popular governor in the United States, even though he is from a safe Democratic state in presidential election years. That doesn't mean that the governor race is always going to be safe for the Democrats. Right now, he leads in opinion polls by over 30%. So Massachusetts right now I'm going to characterize as a safe state for the GOP. As for the state of Texas, another state I'm going to now characterize as a safe state. In the same poll that shows Beto O'Rourke losing to Ted Cruz by around 6%, also shows the Democrat losing to the incumbent GOP governor in Texas by 19 percentage points. So still with the same voting base that shows the Senate race getting a little bit closer, don't expect them to vote the same way in the governor's race. So for right now, Texas, with the popularity of the incumbent Texas governor, right now Texas goes into the safe column for the Republican Party. As for the state of Tennessee, we will come back to that one, but that one used to be a safe Republican state, but we will need to recharacterize it in this video. Right now, with 10 Democratic states, there pretty much are no other safe Democratic states, but there are some likely states. Illinois is one of them, and that is the first flip of the evening. Illinois currently has an incumbent GOP governor who is very unpopular. His current net approval rating is negative 34%. That does not show a good sign for the GOP candidate there. Right now, I think this margin could be around 14%, but possibly could get even more with new data coming out. Illinois could possibly be a safe state by the end of 2018, but at this point in time, I'm going to characterize Illinois as a likely Democratic state. Still going through the map, Pennsylvania joins the likely Democratic characterization. Right now, Pennsylvania is still a Democratic state in terms of the governorship and the Senate elections. Right now, the Democratic governor is currently leading by double digits in opinion polls, so I am comfortable enough putting Pennsylvania in the likely column for the Democrats. As for my home state of Maryland, may seem a little weird, but goes into the likely column for the GOP. Maryland currently has the second most popular governor in the United States, and he is a Republican. This is Governor Larry Hogan, and I do expect him to win by a considerable amount considering Ben Jealous is the Democratic nominee, and we're not seeing any change in opinion polling from where it started before the primary. So right now the Republicans currently have 17 seats, but we can go over to some other races that could be characterized as likely for the GOP. Kansas, for instance, currently has a Democrat, an Independent, and a Republican. I'm going to characterize Kansas as a likely GOP state for the mere reason that Kansas has vote splitting because of the Independent and Democrat. There isn't really an expectance for the Democrats to rally behind an independent with a candidate that they nominated, or the independents to rally behind a certain Democrat. Greg Orban definitely will peel away from both the GOP and the Democrats, but more so the Democrats. I expect the Republicans to win here by a plurality, but by over 5%, so that state goes into the likely column for the GOP. Right over into the state of New Mexico, that one I'm going to characterize as a likely Democratic state, along with the state of Colorado. Even though New Mexico does get a little bit closer in recent polling, I still expect both of those states to end up in the likely column at the end of 2018. Right now, both of these states pretty much hold Democratic tendencies, and it's not really that weird as to how to see both of these states going into the likely Democratic column. As for Minnesota, another state that many people actually think could get a little bit more contested, but no data suggests to the contrary of what I'm going to characterize this race as. As a likely Democratic state, it may seem a little bit weird. Minnesota definitely will be the closer race, but I think with Amy Klobuchar at the top of the ticket in terms of the Senate races, and then, of course, a contested Senate race, I expect Minnesota to have high turnout for Democrats, which isn't the best news, obviously, for the GOP, enough to put it in the likely column for the Democratic Party. Oregon is another state I'm going to put in the likely column for the Democrats, and now the Democrats have the exact same number as where they did leading into these elections by gaining seats in New Mexico, Illinois, and I think that's it for this point in time. But there are, of course, some leaning Republican states, Tennessee and Georgia and Oklahoma. Right now, I'm all going to characterize as leaning Republican states. Tennessee, actually, I'm going to put in the likely column because I think it could narrowly edge over 5%, but I still expect this race to get a little bit closer, as new polling data has suggested, and also just the candidates themselves. Especially with Phil Bredesen running for the United States Senate race, possibly some Republicans could flip towards the Democratic Party, but I don't expect it to be as close as the Senate race, nor as in favor for the Democratic Party. Right now, we can go over to Wisconsin. Right now, that race I'm going to characterize as a leaning Democratic state. All polling data suggests this, number one, and Scott Walker's approval rating is not too high in that state. Also, if you look over at Michigan, that is a state I'm going to characterize as likely. The Democratic candidate is doing very well in opinion polling, and also the incumbent governor doesn't have too high of an approval rating. And also, again, a number of these key Rust Belt states have popular Democrats or just leading Democrats in current Senate polls on the top of the ticket. They will likely bring a lot of these Democrats to victory and could drag them over the finish line, even if it may be by a narrow amount, even though all the Democrats here are leading in opinion polling, even against some Republican incumbents. As for the Northeast, this is an area that typically is characterized as safe for the Democrats, but Vermont I'm actually going to characterize as a leaning GOP state. The new approval rating numbers from the incumbent governor from Vermont are not looking good for him whatsoever. There was a drastic change from where they were approved before and where they are now, especially with Bernie Sanders running for the United States Senate. I expect Vermont to get a lot closer than where I had previously characterized it as a safe GOP state at the beginning of 2018. So we can go over to Maine, which is a state that I expect to be a leaning Democratic state. I expect it to overturn from the GOP, but I don't expect it to be by a very large margin. But still, the Democrats at 19, and we're going to actually go to a race that is pretty contested. But Alaska, I'm going to be comfortable enough to put that one in the leaning Republican column. Alaska right now has an independent incumbent, as this is the same case in Kansas, a Democratic candidate and a Republican candidate. Again, I do not expect the independent to only take away from the Democrats, but pretty much more from the Democratic Party, for obvious reasons. The GOP will likely corral behind their candidate and win by a narrow plurality in the state of Alaska on the mere reason that the incumbent governor is very unpopular. And the GOP, he dropped out of the independent Libertarian Democratic Party, I guess, primary because maybe he would have lost, whatever, but right now, that does not spell out good news for either the Democrats or the incumbent governor in that state. And then we can go down to Florida, which I'm actually going to put in the tilt Republican column. And after that primary, Gwen Graham was pretty much the only Democrat who was leading in opinion polls whatsoever. But she was also leading in opinion polls in terms of the Democratic primary as well. So that just goes to attest in terms of primary polls, but also the general election polls were pretty much accurate in 2016. They accurately predicted a Donald Trump victory in 2016, and pretty much even though Florida is a Republican state, it's still going to be closer than the presidential election. I expect this race definitely to narrow up, but I think that Ron DeSantis could narrowly edge out this race just based off prior primary polling. And there is a new poll that shows the Democrat ahead by 5%, but it was taken on the inside for the Democrats, so obviously it's going to favor them just a little bit. Over in the state of Connecticut, that is a state I still expect to be a likely Democratic state. Now, even with the unpopularity of the incumbent governor, I'm actually going to just give a little bit leeway to the Republicans to put it in the leaning Democratic column, but all data suggests that this race could very much become more of a Democratic state than many people expected. So I was just discussing Vermont, and pretty much Phil Scott has the highest drop from where his approval rating was before. This, keep in mind, was a safe Republican state as of, my most recent prediction, but I failed to realize the new data that actually came out from Vermont. The incumbent Republican governor is not too popular. Vermont goes into the leaning Republican column only because he is narrowly approved of in a heavy Democratic state, but still narrowly goes towards the GOP compared to where it was before as a safe state. But New Hampshire still holding the Republican governor in grace goes into the likely GOP column. So right now we have 25 Republicans and 21 Democrats. Right now we can actually go over to Nevada. So that is a race I previously characterized as tilt for the GOP. I'm actually going to put it in the tilt Democratic column, only because I expect the Democrats to narrowly edge out the Republicans there based off the Senate race and just overall new fundraising data that has come out of the state. Because also, if we look back at 2016, this is a Democratic state. This is another state that underestimates Democrats in opinion polls. So right now, Nevada, I'm actually going to characterize as a tilt Democratic state. But Arizona, Doug Ducey is not too popular either. The numbers that, I just saw and I saw before do not show him at too high of an approval rating. In fact, he's underwater in the state of Arizona. Right now, I expect it to still be a Republican state, but I expect it to be close enough to be characterized as a tilt state for the GOP. Right now, we have 22 Democrats and 26 Republicans. As for the state of Iowa, I actually expect that one to be a tilt Republican state, while I expect Ohio to be a tilt Democratic state. And typically, Ohio and Iowa vote together. However, in this election, with the incumbent Republican in Iowa not being too popular, but still I think can narrowly edge out the Democrat in the state of Iowa, and no polling data suggests otherwise, whereas in Ohio, Cordray leads by around 1%, which is why I expect the race to possibly narrow, but still be a lead for the Democrats at the end of 2018. So this is how the final composition in terms of political parties for the governorships nationwide compared to where it was before. 16 Democrats before, 1 independent, and 33 Republicans, now down to 23 27 Republicans and 23 Democrats. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.